So I realize I've made videos that were critical of both fundamentalist Christian belief systems and new atheist belief systems. And I feel like I probably have an obligation to explain why I did that and why I do that, as it seems that that's the direction this particular channel of mine is going in. I guess I feel like I should probably say some things about what I believe, so that people understand that I'm not just mindlessly criticizing both sides. There is a principle and a framework to it, and I'm doing it for a reason. It's because for the longest time, the sort of materialist atheist community was the dominant community. This reign lasted, if we're being generous, around a century. And during that time, a lot of things got done that couldn't get done in the Christian Anglosphere because people were actually willing to question dogmas. And as tends to happen, belief systems ossify into a cartoon of themselves as they become popular and become filled with less informed people who are not necessarily contributing to the belief system and who like the way that it was when they came into it. It's just an emergent property of human organization that things ossify and have to change. That is part of the system. And the atheistic worldview, though immensely powerful in its materialism and reductionism of things, reached a point where it couldn't go much farther. And as I anticipated, sort of religious thinkers came in to fill the gaps. Now, they filled the gaps in a new way than when they were on the defensive, so to speak, or when they had hegemony. Because now, so the New Atheist Project in many ways was about attacking the idea of an underlying mind. I mean, they'll say it was about attacking the idea of dogma, and to some extent it was. But one of those dogmas was that there is an underlying mind to nature, a disembodied. The idea of a disembodied incarnate intelligence was anathema to materialists, and it should be, because they're materialists. They don't believe in disembodied, disincarnate intelligences. But they reached a point where they started studying themselves. They started studying their own minds. And as a result, they've created things which are at least disembodied computational devices. I'm not willing to call ChatGPT a mind yet, because it's lacking some key characteristics that I think minds have to have. But this being said, the new atheists reached a point where materialism wasn't going to go any farther. And now with ChatGPT, for instance, like a chatbot, you are better off interacting with it as a literary person. You're not better off designing it as a literary person, but you're better off interacting with it as a literary person with the schooling in archetypal language and religious language than you would be as a mathematician, because it's getting to the point where you can't compute it. If it is computable, if its actions aren't entirely random, it is like the emergent properties of its actions aren't entirely random, they're at least non-computable by people. It moves too fast. So now the literary world and the idea of a disincarnate intelligence is finally open for discussion again, which I find very, very interesting. And I think that my prediction that Christian thinkers were going to rush in to fill the space of a disincarnate intelligence and to interact with that disincarnate intelligence and to tell us what to do with it is starting to come true. People like the Discovery Institute, John Lennox, intelligent design making a resurgence, people like Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Haidt, Jonathan Pageau, Bishop Barron, all these people are in some way, shape, or form bringing back some aspects of the old world in a new way, in a either new way of analyzing the text which wasn't there before, or a new way of justifying it in light of current criticisms. So I have no problem with all of this. This is the dialectical way that history progresses. And it doesn't progress toward the end that most people who talk about dialectics would imagine that it progresses in, but the way that history progresses is a back and forth. It's a tussle. It's a conflict between different sources. The implications of that are something for another time that I can't really get into right now because I don't have the time. But I have no problem with the marketplace of ideas being filled with competition. All good marketplaces are filled with competition. That's what they are. But the reason I criticize atheistic people and Christian people together is that I believe that they both have a hard swallow. The atheistic hard swallow is the hard swallow that logic is not enough, and their concept of fraternism, or the idea of human dignity, is basically predicated on the faith in the human soul, of something like that. They replace the concept of the soul with the concept of humanity, and they replace the concept of providence with the concept of progress. And they're going to have to realize that those are sort of irrational claims that they need to examine further. The Christian victory is that you have a disincarnate intelligence, and the world is probably the product of design. Now, it can be very easy for Christians to jump back on the bandwagon of Jesus, given those two claims. It's like, oh, well, we have some sort of intelligent design thing going on. Oh, like the signature in the cell, all this stuff, the fine-tuning argument, all of these things, they do point to some sort of creative intelligence. However, and you get disembodied intelligences. You can have angels, demons, you can have spirits, you can have various forces like that. You might even be able to have an intelligence that passes from body to body. So all of that points in their favor to some extent. However, the hard swallow for Christians is that their worldview, which was correct about many things intuitively, is based on a myth. And that myth presents itself, at least parts of itself, as historical. And the hard swallow they're going to have to realize is that historical, you can't take a mythical text at face value historically, because that's just not a logically consistent thing to do. If you take your founding myth on the assumption that it's true, you're going to have to do that logically to every other mythological set of first principles. And because many of them are contradictory with yours, because that's how monotheism is, you're going to have some real problems with that. And you are going to have a very hard time carving out hegemony and supremacy with that, while still maintaining a firm grasp on that sort of logic and reason and truth you claim to hold in such high esteem. So, although the idea, like, you won certain battles, you won the idea of disincarnate intelligence. You won the idea that, the personal, that truth can be personal, that the universe even can be personal in some way. There's this division that the atheists insisted on between sort of the machine and the person, and people are just machines, and that's untrue. People, the human organism is not mechanical. It's not computable precisely in the way that a calculator computes things. So the theists won that side of the debate. It turns out that they are true. But where all the different monotheists are going to have a problem is realizing that their version of theism is based on a myth. And I'm not going to say a lie because, that's accusatory, and I don't think the people who originate myths are liars. I think they're storytellers. And I don't mean that to trivialize what they're saying, because obviously, as I've said, truth can be personal. That doesn't mean it's whatever you say it is. That means it's personal. And that's what Christians have been saying for a long time. But you're going to have to remove that idea from the founding documents of your belief system and look at it very, very carefully to see where you're stretching your faith a little bit too far and where you could use a little bit more natural theology, or looking at stuff, as the common person would say it, to justify your claims a little more. So that's why I criticize both atheists and not just fundamentalist Christians, but monotheism in general. I think it takes certain truths that the atheists have discovered through their painstaking analysis of the material world, such as the material world can be described as a person that you interact with as an other, and it has characters, and if you interact with it, those characters in certain ways, you get certain things. I mean, that is true now, and we're starting to replicate those characters in our machines. But part of the problem with that, the Christian problem with that, is that they insist that their character is the best. And, I think, and they base that on a myth. And that myth is not true. And I don't think you can show it to be true in good faith. And I know I didn't necessarily go all the way into what I believe, because that's a video for a longer time, or for more time. That would take more time to describe. But I just wanted to make a video about why I'm critical of both monotheists and atheists. So from that point forward, I guess you can view my criticisms with a little bit more charity, that I'm not just like being a contrarian.